Welcome to Hustle and Flow with Heather Hubbard, episode number 53. Hi, I'm Heather Hubbard, and I was a litigator, partner, and practice group leader at an AmLaw 200 firm. I know what it takes to rise to the top. I also know all too well the toll it can take on your personal life. So how do you shine bright without burning out? How do you embrace your ambition without selling your soul? You're listening to the Hustle and Flow podcast. Welcome back. I am your host, Heather Hubbard, and I am so excited to share with you my guest today. I met her about a year ago in Hawaii, of all places. We are both in a mastermind together called CEO Circle, and she has so much wisdom that I cannot wait to share with you. And so my special guest is Lynne Maureen Hurdle. She is a conflict resolution strategist, facilitator, and a coach. She is known as the conflict closer. She helps leaders learn to improve their communication skills, especially around conflict. And you may have heard of her. She has been a speaker at TEDx Women, and she is a regular writer for Psychology Today. Lynne, welcome to the Hustle and Flow podcast.
Thank you, Heather. I am excited. Hustle and flow. That's what I'm all about. Yay. And I'm thrilled to be here with you and your audience.
Awesome. Well, let's jump right in. So Lynne is great with conflict, and you guys might be thinking, well, we're good with conflict too, right? As attorneys, we are adversarial by nature. We are often considered hired guns, and for the most part, I think that's true. It's easy for us to go into court or go into negotiations and have difficult conversations, but that's on behalf of someone else. When you flip the script and it's your own conversation, your assistant, your spouse, a friend, a coworker, suddenly it gets a lot more difficult. And I personally think that attorneys are very passive aggressive and really hate confrontation if it involves them personally as opposed to advocating on someone else's behalf. So that's part of why Lynne is here today. I want her to help us walk through how we can start to be better at having difficult conversations. So Lynne, I know this is a topic that you are passionate about. Talk to me about why you think having difficult conversations is so important in the first place.
Well, first of all, I think it's incredibly important because I'm on this campaign to get people to have a relationship with conflict. I actually call it getting intimate with conflict because we are, for the most part, afraid and avoiders of conflict, particularly in our personal lives. Now, as attorneys, yes, you said it's business. You know, as a conflict resolution strategist, when I'm helping other people in conflict, it's business. But our first introduction to conflict in life was not business, most of us. I don't think any of us really. We learned and got early messages about conflict when we were growing up. And so it has a very negative connotation. And I think that it's really important for us to start to delve into that and start to tear it apart, because conflict is about conversation, and the best conversations are the ones where we can go deep and really be honest and upfront about what's going on so that we can put it all on the table and come to some kind of not just resolution, but another perspective to really start looking at conflict for what it really is, what it brings to us, what we can learn from it, and then how we benefit from it by resolving it.
Yeah, I have to say, my hand is raised. I do not like personal confrontations. Yeah, because it's like just so easy. Like it's easier to walk away or defriend someone on Facebook or in my case, like stop going in for certain holidays or whatever else, as opposed to having those really hard conversations. And I would imagine that given the current just climate that we're in the United States right now, this is becoming an important issue, right? We're so divided.
It's a huge issue. And see, for me, I think the complication comes with the fact that conflict often shows up paired with emotion. And the two together, like we're taught early on too. I know especially men are taught this, but even as girls, boys, women, however you define yourself, early on in childhood, we get the information that talking about our feelings is really not the best thing to do. And making someone else feel bad about our feelings is even worse. And so when you have conflict and feelings get stirred, which they do, then you've got these two negative things coming up for you, and people just don't want to engage.
Yeah. But you think we need to?
We have to. We have to. I mean, for me, the best thing about the climate that we're in, whether we like it or not, everything is just getting thrown out there. I mean, people are just saying whatever they feel, and they're not doing it in the best ways. But we are hearing from more people that might have been silent before this. And if we're going to really start to repair things, have real relationships and real conversations, then we are going to have to indulge in learning about how to engage in conflict, especially in the difficult conversations, and in a way that keeps us in relationship with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, even the internet, right? Like that's certainly not helping things, and that many of us don't engage the way we used to. We do it all either through email or Facebook Messenger, and it's a lot easier to say things in words as opposed to looking someone in the eyes or being on the phone and having an actual conversation where you can, maybe humanize the other person.
Right. And the other thing about that kind of communication is that when you are not looking at the person and you're engaged in a conversation that is about conflict or adversarial in nature, or just disagreeing with people in nature, the first thing the other person thinks when they read your email is that it has a negative slant to it. Even if that's not your intention, that is what the brain goes to. And so we already have a problem then if even when you are trying to communicate to me in what you might consider a neutral way, I'm looking at it and I'm seeing it as a negative thing. That's causing all kinds of problems. So you go on social media and you could write something that to you is really harmless, and someone else reading it, because they don't have any other information, they don't have you, they don't have your tone, your intent, they're not looking at you, they can see that as really an insult, offensive, and it's happening all over the place. And then people are second guessing themselves because they're saying, well, what did I say? What was so wrong with what I said?
Right.
It wasn't what you said, right? It wasn't what you'd posted. It was the person's perspective on what you posted.
There is so much here. We could talk for hours. Okay, so here's what I think would be super helpful if you're up for it.
Okay.
I think I would love to just share a few different scenarios with you that I think are pretty common in the legal industry, and see if you can kind of just walk us, do a little training, help walk us through how we might approach these better. Does that sound okay to you?
I'd love to do that, but I'd love to say one more thing first.
Yeah.
Yes. And I want to say that my work itself started to be transformed when I actually started to see that, contrary to popular belief, you really cannot separate the personal from the business. How you are in personal, it's going to show up somewhere in the business. Even if you teach these skills, even if you use these skills on the behalf of someone else, at some point they come out somewhere else. So it's almost like the director calls cut and you show up the real you, right? And you start to engage in conflict the way that you truly do engage, even though you know these skills. So it wasn't until I started to have a deeper relationship with conflict myself, understanding how I come to conflict, what are the messages that have been translated into me, and what are my personal triggers. When I started to investigate that and then began to kind of take those apart and apply the skills, it wasn't until then that my life was transformed, both business and personal, and my work is transformed with my clients. So I say that to say skills are one thing, right? But you got to get to the mindset piece too. You've got to understand your own relationship with conflict and start to have a better one.
That is so good. Yes, I was telling you earlier, I was getting triggered today by a few different people. And my listeners know I'm all about mindset. So yeah, this is great. So we're probably going to go through some scenarios that may not apply to everyone because in the sense that you've got to figure out what it is for you. But I'm thinking it still will be helpful in just getting people thinking about it.
Cool.
Okay.
I can widen the lens. We'll see,
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's start with, this one is probably kind of common. It's probably happened at some point or another in a lawyer's life. And that is that they're working with someone that answers to them. So whether it's, an assistant technically answering to an associate or an associate answering to a partner, basically the person that's in the supervisory role, they're not happy with the way something is being done, but they don't really want to give negative or critical feedback, right? They don't want to hurt someone's feelings. So they kind of, they say things like, you could improve on this or you could improve on that. And after saying that a few times and it doesn't improve, then they just stop working with them or they complain to HR. It may or may not even be in, a written evaluation. How do you go about those difficult conversations of really giving someone feedback in a way that they truly understand that they are not living up to your standards? And why should we do that to begin? Surely it's obvious, but I'm going to let you talk about it.
Right. Okay. So first of all, let me just say to folks who they may be beginning a relationship with someone, with an assistant or someone that reports to them, like you're right there right now, getting ready to begin this relationship. You are in the best place, if that is you, because now is the time to have the conversation about how things work. And what I mean by that is, what's the best way for us to work together? What's the best way for us to communicate when something isn't right and when something is right? What's the best way for us to check in with each other, right? Or how I like to check in. And let's have a conversation about that so that right at the start, we are setting ourselves up to engage in conversation. Now, most of us are not at that point. We're already in. We've probably already just even maybe at the point of disregarding this person or frustrated and totally fed up. I have to tell you that if you've invested any time and energy in this person and the intention is for this person to stay, then that right there is your motivation for going back and saying, we really need to have a real conversation about how things are going and where we may be missing each other in terms of communication. And then lay it out. Hey, it's tough for people to hear the things about themselves that may not be living up to your standards. But if you combine them with the things that are, and I'm not one of these, like, let's go for the positive first. I think you sit down and you put it all in there together. So here are the things that are not working. Here are the things that are working. And so let's talk about why the things that are working work, like what makes those things work. And let's talk about why the things that are not working aren't working. And most of the time, it's a communication thing. It's like they really don't understand what it is that you are communicating to them. And sometimes we think it's them, and it can be us in that we're not the greatest communicators, that we really aren't clear about what it is that we really want And why, when we receive it in a way that isn't up to our standards, why not? What is it about this that needs to be improved? It's an investment. And a lot of times we are very busy and we don't see the benefit to investing that kind of time. But the benefit is that down the line, when they get it, then you're starting to roll, and you don't have to start all over with someone else, because you don't know what you're getting in that someone else. And you're still having to develop a working relationship based on really solid communication.
So let's say it is, your communication that's the problem, and you're not very clear. One, how would you, I guess, be able to identify that? And two, if you aren't real clear, what would be the steps to trying to improve that piece?
Okay, great. First of all, if you've got solid evidence, I'll speak in terms of voice, if you got solid evidence, right, that this isn't working, then let's take that. Let's break that apart. So when I say this particular sentence isn't working, or this, what do you hear, right? What are you hearing me say? Because if you can do a check-in almost step by step, because sometimes we really do not hear each other well, or we put in our own interpretation, and that just derails the whole conversation. So it really is a matter of, when I say this, or when I point out this, mark this, what is it that you interpret that as? And so here's what I mean. And so we've got to have some kind of system where it's built in. Am I clear? So when you say yes, it isn't just I've asked the question and you say yes. It's that we've actually said, okay, this is what you want. Am I right? Is that what you want? Yes. Or this is what I want. Let me just make sure with you that you understand what it is that I want. Also, I don't know that people take the time to understand how people learn best. And I know that that could be time consuming on some parts. But if you're constantly putting things in writing, and that's where the miscommunication is, then you may have to invest the time in talking. Maybe you record it. I don't know. But really, sometimes people miscommunicate more in one modality than they do in another. So investigating that a little bit could help as well. Now, if you are someone who just, no matter what, the person, you just aren't someone who communicates well, and then you get that feedback from others, then you need to look into how you get those skills up to par, right? Maybe you need a coach, maybe you need to take a workshop. But if the problem lies with the way in which you communicate, with enough people giving you that feedback, then look into getting your skills to that place.
That's great advice. Okay, so let's say that you logically get the conversation. So it's like, Lynne, I hear what you're saying. That makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I go to have that conversation, my heart starts racing and I get really nervous. And then I find something else to do because, I've got this knot in my throat. What's that about? And is there anything you can do, or do you just have to push through it?
Great question, because I don't know that there's anyone that doesn't happen to. I really don't. So first of all, I'm going to say this, and I'm sure, Heather, you believe in this too. If you're not doing anything around self-care, you need to do something around self-care. And I mean that to say not just maybe you go to the gym. I mean something that you put in place that allows you to bring yourself down when your heart is racing, when you're really upset or nervous, that you actually have some techniques in place. I work a lot with the breath, and it doesn't take a lot of time at all for me to breathe and bring myself to a great place. If you know that you're going to have the conversation, then maybe you need to spend a few minutes just sitting in silence to prepare yourself to really focus in. And that's another technique, is focusing in on the other person and really trying to hear what they have to say from their perspective really closes out some of those negative thoughts and feelings that may be happening because you're so focused in on hearing them and really intently listening so that you understand them, that there isn't room for the other things to happen. But you have to have something before you go in because it is going to happen. Anticipate it. No, okay, this is me. This is what happens to me when I have to have this kind of conversation. So I'm going to spend a little time just putting myself in a place where I can bring it down some, knowing that, once you get into the conversation, it may come back up again. Then pause, take a minute.
Yeah.
Really put yourself in that place. I think that people are embarrassed to do things like that. And the truth is, if you don't know yourself, number one, in conflict, and then take care of yourself in conflict, you are always going to be heading for the exit rather than engaging.
Yeah. Okay. And I bet a lot of people listening are like, hands raised. I head for the exit door. All right. So let's talk through another one that I'm sure comes up for a lot of people. And this one is probably even more difficult than the first. And that is, so if you're in a law firm and you're a partner, you might even be an associate. One of the things that people track, everybody gets credit for work that comes in, and that's part of how you get paid, and that's how you get promoted. So one of the things that it's cultural in the legal industry, a lot of people don't share. They don't share well. They don't share credit. So you're doing all of this work behind the scenes, or you're doing work with another person. You think that you're a team, right? Like you think
Right.
We're a team, and you go to get this client, you go to get this work, it comes in the door, they open the matter, and it goes through like whatever system is out there, and you see that it was opened and you received no credit. Mm-hmm. And then you get really resentful and mad. And so a lot of times people either then start avoiding those people, or if they do bring it up, sometimes they even get labeled as, someone that's greedy or a whiner. And so it creates all of this drama. And we start to create all these stories in our heads about, well, I can't ask for that. So I'd be really curious as to how you would suggest approaching those types of conversations, both on the front end and the back end, when you feel like someone who's supposed to be on your team, who is supposed to be your partner, is not being fair. And it's not just, a theoretical fairness. It genuinely impacts your pay at the end of the day.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's really important to get clear with yourself first, what this is about for you. You've raised some really important points. It's about, one thing is money, right? It's your pay, it's your reputation, it's your time, your effort, it's fairness, a lot of things. But what's your thing? What is it really about for you? And I ask that because when you decide to engage, which I do think that you're going to need to do that at some point, I want you to be clear about what it's, because you can be all over the place about all of the reasons why it is wrong. But what's it for you? What's the real deal for you about this? And that's the thing that you want to communicate. So maybe you observe the first time that this happens and you decide, you know what, I'm not going to say anything this time, but know your reasons for it. I don't know. I'm not saying that you should, but I'm saying maybe that's what you've decided. I don't want to engage on this at this point in time, but if it happens again, I really do need and want to speak up. Then be clear. Here's what I would like to say about what has happened. Here's why it's important to me. And I want us to talk about how we resolve this so that I can feel better, but also that I can feel that we are working together as a team. Because let's find out what teamwork even means to each other. Because maybe that person doesn't see this as a part of it. Maybe it's not intentional. Maybe it is, but you want to try to find out why you're being left out. And if this is something that's systemic, then that requires another thought process for yourself. So is this already built into the system? Is it because I'm a woman? Is it because I'm new? Is it whatever? right? Then you want to investigate a little more as to what the reasons could be. And when you decide that you want to speak up, you want to be able to put some things on the table in a way that people can hear, knowing that it's going to push some buttons, and you've got to be ready to stand strong in that. And that's why I'm saying to you for this one, I want you to really think and get clear first. A lot of times we react, we're frustrated, we're resentful, so we react. Like you said, maybe we don't work with that person anymore, or maybe we lash out, or maybe we hide. Those are reactions. What I want you to be prepared for is a response. And that means really sitting and thinking about what this brings up for you, why this is important for you to take on. Is this systemic? How do you then put that on the table in a real way where people can hear you, even if it pushes buttons and they don't want to hear you? And then what is it that you want out of the situation? What's going to satisfy you when you walk away from this conversation? And then what does it mean to you if this doesn't resolve it? Do you want to go back in? Really thinking about what are my steps and why? Because I'm one for engaging in conflict, but I'm one for doing it skillfully and thoughtfully, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And what's the cost to me? And what's the cost to the person, the company, whatever it is? But I start with me, the cost to me, because it costs you something to sit and be resentful week after week, month after month, year after year. That costs you health-wise, right? And it costs you in not engaging. So now you're even more afraid of conflict. The more you engage, the more that you face it and see that it is not as bad as it is, or maybe it's as bad as it is, but you're still getting better at doing it. Like, maybe I really don't like it. I have to be honest. I hate the dentist. I've gotten really good at the dentist, though. Why? Because I hate the dentist. I have so much work that had to be done that I was either going to avoid it or I was going to have to learn how to take the needles and learn how to do the surgery. And I had to learn how to do that. So now I take the time beforehand to get myself ready for it. And honestly, it is nowhere near as bad as it used to be for me because I've gotten good at it. Now, that seems strange, but it's true. Same thing for conflict. You can get good at this, but you have to engage in it. But start in a smart, thoughtful, skillful way. The dangerous ones, in quotes, right? The ones that could be really, really costly, like this one, you want to prepare for those. But my advice is that you don't ever want to avoid something constantly, because the payoff is zero for you in that.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I see over and over again, whether it is conversations with other partners or even, a lot of times people want certain things to change in their job or they want certain accommodations, but they're too afraid to ask, or they're working for a really difficult person and they don't want to have that conversation. And the reason why they tell you they don't want to have the conversation is it won't go well, they won't accept it, and then I'll be asked to leave. But what happens is they end up leaving on their own because they're so unhappy. And so it's it still would have been the same result, even if your worst fear came true, which makes me think that's not the real motivating factor. That really spoke to me when you were saying the more you disengage, the scarier it is.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
It becomes even bigger and bigger. So that is great. Let me ask you this, because I know that, again, we are skilled at conflict when we are representing someone else, but not always in our own career. For those that struggle with this, that have a hard time with those difficult conversations and want to be skillful and want to learn how to, work through their emotions and figure out what's really going on so that they can start to get better results and have better relationships, how can people reach out and work with you?
Thank you for asking. So first of all, I work with a lot of clients now on building their leadership core. Our core in our body supports everything that we do, and our core in leadership supports that as well. So core for me is communication, objectivity, resolving conflicts, and executing excellence. All of this around the work of communication and conflict. So you can go to my website, Lynne, Lynne, Maureen, Maureen, Hurdle, HURDLE.com. And you can see all of the different ways that you can work with me there. And if you in particular want to check out my Build Leadership Coaching program, then just go to buildleadershipcore.com.
We will put those links in the show notes as well, so you don't have to you don't have to memorize those. You can also just go to the show notes and click the link. That is awesome. Lynne, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Oh, it was a pleasure to be invited, and I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, Heather.
Wonderful. All right, everyone have a great week, and we'll talk soon. For show notes, downloads, and other free resources, and to keep the conversation going, head on over to hustleandflowpodcast.com. See you there.